We're here to share an experience love to we'd love for you to know about. It's been in the works for months, and it's called Luces or Lights because it's all about the light. It has to do with the energy transition from a very local perspective. So we'll share a little bit of what we have been doing. But before that, I want to introduce all of my friends sitting here with me, Marcela Ibarra Mateos. She is head of the Economic and Social Innovation Division of the Universidad Iberoamericana Puebla. She has a PhD in social sciences. She has a master's degree from the Interdisciplinary Center for Regional Support, and she has a bachelor's degree from the UDLA. She was coordinator of the social change and communication faculty, and she's also founder as well as head of research on migration from the Ibero Puebla. Joining us remotely is Joaquin Pereira, who is there. You can see him on the screen. He has 20 years of experience in sustainability, carbon emissions, and renewable energy. He was head of monitoring of hydroelectric energy and clean mechanisms in the Kyoto Protocol. As an independent consultant, he has done work for distributed generation, as well as environmental impact studies on environment and renewable energy technologies. He studied at La Salle University in Mexico City, and he currently works as a technical advisor in the program to support energy transition in Mexico in the GIZ. Thank you very much, Joaquin. And Joaquin, as part of the project that we will be introducing, has been in charge of the work on behalf of the GIZ. I want to introduce Alejandra Cruz. She's an economist from the UNAM. She specializes in social development. She has experience researching community models to tackle climate change. She has been a public official in the environmental sector in Mexico, especially in urban sustainability and power. As a consultant, she has worked with international organizations in energy transition, and she specializes in sustainability in DGRB Mexico. She worked on the pilot projects of DGRB. She's been very involved in the whole process. Also from DGRB, joining us remotely is Camila Jap from Brazil. She is a Brazilian economist from the Universidad Pontificia Católica of Sao Paulo. For 15 years, she has worked on international cooperation and project management on renewables energy. She's project manager for all the activities in Brazil and coordinator of renewable energies of the participation and sustainability projects of the DGBR in Latin America. And last, but certainly not least, we have Abraham Miones Payan. He has been working directly with the groups where the pilot projects have been implemented. He studied design in the Ibero Puebla, and he's studying in that same institution. He has studied graphic design since 2018. He's also a cooperative partner in projects such as Kangaroo and social economy topics. This is the panel. Thank you very much, Paco, for your introduction of everyone who has participated in the process. Welcome and good morning to everyone who is here with us, who has stuck around both on our in-present event and also in the virtual event. Together with the GIZ, we decided to present this project, which has been very close to the lab because it has entailed a lot of learning and collaboration, which is valuable for us. The Economic and Social Innovation Lab has over 5 years of experience, but at the same time, we're starting to work on sustainable energy. And I think it's worth mentioning that this is a process that we have embraced, I would say, based on the two great paradigms of sustainable energy. On the one hand, there's a very centralized perspective of power generation that prioritizes generation by large multinational corporations that end up occupying large territories of our communities. Sometimes they dispossess them of their lands. And we are rather on the other alternative of distributed generation, where we privilege local work, where power generation responds to local needs of the population who will also use that energy. And there's also a learning process for those who want to work as part of a cooperative, create a business model on sustainable energy. So that's how this dialogue began with our partners. We began the process of learning, of training, of building a team. And I'm here to talk about the project today, but behind me, and I don't know if you could help me show my slides, but behind me is a very large team of collaborators who have been involved in the process. Could you help me? Do you have my presentation? I'd like to show my slides. My team is made up of, and I will name them because even though they're not here, they've done wonderful work. Abraham Briones, Berenice Reyes, Brenda Ramirez, Alondra Ramirez, Ariadna Garzón, Guillermina Coronado, Mariana Reyes, and Paco, who was in charge of all the outreach for the strategic project. We have our partners who funded the pilots as well. And there are two technical teams that were also involved in the process. I looks like my slides are not ready, so I will maybe speak a little bit slower so that I don't forget anything that I had planned. But the work that we have been doing was done in 5 places in the country. 5 pilots began to train and to support more than cooperatives. Now, in hindsight, I would say that more than supporting cooperatives, we were supporting cooperativists and sustainable energy. Okay, this is where we are. This is exactly where we are. There are 3 pillars of the project. I had already mentioned the first, which is training and supporting cooperatives in developing sustainable energy, but above all, training those who are part of the cooperatives. So the population themselves who raised their hands and said, we have a need for power here and we want to collaborate with you. The second pillar is developing and doing capacity building for internal and external management by organizing workshops. So it was about how the cooperatives could manage all their processes even after we left their lands. And of course, one of the great interests of GIZ and DGRB is replicability for the pilot. So having a methodology, a model that in the future could be applied, of course, adapting it to the local context, but in other places. These are the 5 sites, 5 diverse, very different sites with different needs, with different conditions. The first one was Ures, Sonora. We partnered with a civil society organization called Caminemos Juntos. let's walk together. And it's important to mention that we didn't go directly to the population. We found partners, organizations that had already been doing some work in the ground. Caminemos Juntos was the association that allowed us to come close to a group of police officers who wanted to create an energy cooperative. The second pilot project was in Quetzalan, Puebla. We partnered with Tosepan, which is a well-known cooperative with a lot of experience doing cooperative work. We supported them in their energy sovereignty plan. They had already been working with indigenous groups, Macehual, Totonaco, and Mestiza of the northern mountain ranges of Puebla. So they were already in the middle of a democratic process, and it's part of a PRONACES project with the support of CONACYT Mexico. The next pilot project, and this one is still nearing its end in Tlaquepaque, Jalisco, with DGRV, which had also been working in the region already before. Andres Aranda, in particular, was working with brick building cooperatives in the area, and we started working with them to facilitate and support their transition to from an handcrafted brick building production to a more sustainable, less polluting activity that could promote greater competitiveness for the workers in the market. I was introducing our 5 pilot projects, and now I want to share a little bit of how the process was implemented. We were a very big team. We had people who were responsible in each of the 5 sites, who visited the sites constantly, who stayed for 1 week periods, more or less, to support the local communities. But we also have an institutional team with people from DGRV, GIZ, the Ibero Lab, and we were in permanent communication, monitoring the progress of our process. There was a coordinating team from LINES. We were there to oversee processes in the field and also the training process and the methodology, monitoring, assessment, and systematization, which were very important for the project. Key partners, which I had mentioned before. By partners, we mean organizations or groups who already had been working for quite some time in the communities, local leaders like Abram, groups and collectives that were interested in creating this cooperative group. And of course, we worked both in person and online. When the pandemic hit, we had to get very creative and try to continue monitoring, even at a distance, all the training processes that we had in motion. There are 2 pictures. I'm sorry, if you could go back to my previous slides. These are 2 pictures of the brick builders of Tlaquepaque. That's one of the furnaces where they burn the material for the bricks, and that's part of what they want to change in their processes. And those are some members of the cooperative that we worked with. As I've said, this is a community-based, local, participatory approach that was in motion. And we have here another picture of the beneficiaries, the cooperatives in Punta Allen. As you can see on the picture on the bottom, these are fishermen from May to December. That's their main activity, but they also do other things the rest of the year. Going back to something I said before, operating this project in the field always considered the needs of the people and communities. So we adapted the training and we supported them based on their timelines, based on their logistics, their dynamics. So even though we did have a framework for the training in the 5 sites, we adapted it based on the needs that every group expressed. Next slide, please. And that's the group of police officers. We also held meetings with them. And I think this is one of the most important parts of the process that we want to share, which is the methodology of the Luz Es project. So it's people centered. So we have the individual there because we know that every member of a cooperative has needs, has a way of doing things. And that's important to bear in mind by when we try to introduce a gender perspective. We know that women are also involved with the cooperatives, and at the same time they do a lot of the work at home with their families. So that also entails some adapting of processes because we have to consider both productive processes and reproductive processes. So the individual is very important. We supported entrepreneurship, so developing an identity for the cooperative. This is, of course, a collective process, in some cases, a business model promoted in a specific community, where a sense of belonging is extremely important to the training. And once we have that, once we have the individual who becomes an entrepreneur with an identity and a sense of belonging, we go to the actual processes that have to do with the cooperatives themselves. So, how to self manage some of the inner workings of the collective, how to generate technical knowledge, economic production processes, how wealth is distributed within the cooperative, and how decisions are made. So there are many things regarding horizontal leadership that are dealt with here. And of course, what we want to reach is the conclusion of an ecosystem, a social economy ecosystem, where these groups of cooperatives can articulate with other similar groups and other stakeholders, such as the academia, social sector, the private sector, and the government. Next slide, please. These are the stages of the process. A very important part was opening a dialogue with stakeholders. So the discussions with the organizations, with the leaders on the ground, with other stakeholders within the community. So we started with a participatory diagnosis, mapping of stakeholders to understand the network, the relations, understanding potential areas of tension or conflict when working with the process. The next stage was awareness raising, both on the technical side and in the cooperative. When I talk about the technical side, I mean the definitions of what sustainable energy means, not only solar PV, but wind power and other sustainable energy sources that can lead to generating power in different ways in a community. Next, we had a stage to actually build the group with everything that we had mentioned before. And finally, the training process, which entails accompanying through a series of stages from definition, ideation, development, and finally, the pilot being implemented in each of these communities. Next slide, please. At the end of this whole process, and I want to be very brief because I know that we lost some time because of the technical issues that we had with the internet connection. But at the end of the process, we designed a model to accompany the collective development of renewable energy projects. This is part of a dynamic that I presented linearly here, but the truth is that many processes are cyclic. So, of course, the diagnosis is one first step, but at the same time, during training and when you accompany them, there are new elements of diagnosis because communities are always very dynamic. So we started with preliminary activities, the planning part of the process, the situational understanding, getting to know the communities, calling and inviting all stakeholders to participate. It's not always easy because we worked in communities where there not always was a group already created or who were not interested in participating, or they were very small, or a lot of the community was not involved. So that was a very important part of the process. Next, the process of training, co-creating the project, which also there's a lot of organizing, motivating and encouraging them, capacity building, and finally the technical and economic feasibility of the project. So in very general terms, this is the model that we designed and we hope it can be replicated. We will publish our results in the form of a guideline or an actual model that can be used as reference. And next slide, please. And I want to go a little bit more quickly here. These are some of the results of the process. We worked with 70 people in 5 different sites. Most of our participants were men, 63%, and 37% were women. We had training sessions and technical workshops. The technical training always focuses on the type of sustainable energy source that we're working with in every community. 37 didactic materials were developed for the workshops, and some specific material for each of the sites was also designed. Next slide, please. In the trainings that we held, 6 funding proposals were presented in 2 different sites and based on 2 different business models. So as I said, a guideline was developed and there were directories also of relevant stakeholders so that the projects can be replicated. When we're getting to the end, as part of my final thoughts or reflections, I want to share that one of the things that we considered most important in the process was the diagnosis. So first, we have to know what the community understands about the sustainable energy source. We need to bridge the gap between the demands and the supply or the sources that are available to see if they will indeed help to meet their demands. And we must understand that this is not only about power generation, it's about transforming consumption logics in each of these communities. It's very important to work with partners, with the coordinating team. We must come with common ideas, understand the concepts in the same way when we start working with them, so that as we train the collectives and as we support them, it's a very harmonious process. Next slide, please. Something that seems to be obvious, but it's still worth mentioning, is that it's important to be there constantly supporting them on the ground. This is essential when you're dealing with social and solidarity economy. This is not work that's created in a desk. It's something that's living, that's organic, that is created through discussions that are ongoing, listening to the communities and what the groups propose. And to do that, you have to be there with them. Of course, you can use some technological tools to be closer when you can't be there, but being there in person is very important to get positive outcomes. This is another meeting we held with landowners, collective landowners in Mexico City, and I had already named them at the beginning, but these are the names of the team so that you see that this is very hard work. It's not easy to provide the support that the cooperatives need. There's a lot of coordination necessary to follow all the processes. And I think this is my last slide. These are all our partners on the bottom of the slide. Thank you very much. And I know that I took a bit of time. Thank you. Thank you, Marcela. In this project, and I think a key word to understand everything that you said is the word pilot. What we've been hearing in other panels is that cooperatives in Mexico face many challenges to continue growing, to develop. But when it comes to sustainable energy sources, the energy transition, how can we bring that closer to cooperatives? And this is very popular in Mexico today, talking about sustainable energy, renewables. So, how can communities locally benefit from this, and how can they be organized above all, as you say? Next, I would like to ask some questions to the panelists who are with us, and I'd like to start with the DGRV. So Alejandra and Camila, who are both here with us. So first of all, something that might seem obvious about this experience, but we are streaming live all over the world. So maybe the first question is, what is the DGRV? Perhaps not everyone is familiar with it, in your own words. And second of all, what is the benefit of working with cooperatives? If cooperatives get a benefit from becoming an energy cooperative, what role can they play in the energy transition? Camila, could you help us answer the question first, and then we'll bring it back to Alejandra? Yes, thank you very much. I'll be happy to start, and then Alejandra can add to whatever I say. We are the German Cooperatives Confederation. We carry out projects in many countries in all continents, promoting and fostering cooperatives. And one of the topics that became very relevant in the last few years is renewable energy together with sustainability. So Alejandra and I are now working on a project for Latin America. We're working with 10 different countries. Mexico is a very important one. Brazil, we're in Ecuador, El Salvador, Guatemala, and some other countries. So I can share a little bit of the experience that we have had with energy cooperatives or power cooperatives here in Brazil. They were allowed in 2016. And also, I want to share a success story from Germany. We have power cooperatives, over 800 now, who are generating power but offering other services as well. So first, let me talk about the benefits of having an energy cooperative. I think there are two aspects that have many things in common. First of all, the goal of a cooperative is always to solve a problem or to develop a joint project. So people who have a common goal get together to do something. That's what a cooperative is, but it should be sustainable. That's a very important aspect of it. So the first step is to analyze the feasibility. Before you begin training, you have to find a group where there's trust among them. That's a very important part of the project. Everyone who has participated in it knows that to create a cooperative, there has to be trust, but it is also a legal entity that represents a series of people wanting to do something together. And of course, cooperatives take different legal shapes depending on the country where you are, but the idea, the principle, the concept of a cooperative, the values of a cooperative is having a democratic, community-based cooperative project. So now, when we talk about decentralized energy, it really exists quite like that. Energy independence, sustainable energy, accessible or cost-effective energy. That's very important for people nowadays. What I can share about Germany is that these cooperatives also help to drive local development, local economies, not only by creating or by generating power, but because people get involved doing so much more than generating power. It's a series of people who get together and can work together, and that can lead to a wide-ranging impact in a territory. From a technical perspective, German cooperatives are largely found in rural areas, so they have led to the creation of high-quality jobs and also stopped certain migration flows towards the cities. There is also decentralization and having power generation in the hands of communities. That's very important. In Germany, a lot has been said about energy transition. It's become very important, more than just a project. It's something that society has embraced, the government has embraced, the private sector, and individuals. But what was clear was that large corporations were not as concerned about the future. So it was up to individuals and communities to fight for that ethical energy transition. Now, almost 47% of renewable energy is in the hands of the people. So Germany really is a very interesting example. 40% of the power generated comes from sustainable sources. And I think we lost Camila, but I think the figures that she's sharing are very interesting, saying that 40% of the power generated in Germany is generated by cooperatives, by communities, is something to aspire to. I think this is something that we should all try to achieve, and we should try to learn from that experience in countries like Mexico. I don't know, Alejandra, if you would like to add to what Camila was saying. Perhaps I would say something about the background of Proyecto Luces. We started by looking into the theory, gathering information with the GIZ and INAES. We published the guideline for power generation for cooperatives in Mexico, especially solar PV, energy, collective power, participatory power. But what would that mean for us? What is sustainable energy and what is cooperative energy? DGRV, as a champion of cooperatives in Germany and in over 30 countries in the world, firmly believe in the model of cooperatives for the power sector as well. However, in all the countries where we work, the regulatory framework is different, circumstances are different. Camila has shared a little bit about the German context, but this is what we learned from to create the case for Mexico. After we gathered information, we started designing pilot projects together with the INAES people to see how this could translate into real life projects, how we could document our experiences, learn from them, and continue to grow. Hopefully, one day to have power generation, 40% of the power generation be in the hands of communities as well. But at the end of the day, cooperative power is about putting the energy transition in the hands of people through sustainable models and not have a project that cannot be replicated, that cannot be scaled up, but rather that people will have ownership of the energy transition process. And to achieve that, we have been creating models of cooperative power. We believe that a power cooperative is a group where people get together to find a solution to economic and social problems, to achieve economic, social, and power goals. And I think this is closely related to what Marcel already told us. It's not only a technical aspect, it's a social, organizational, and legal process. When you're talking about a legal entity, a cooperative as a legal entity, but there are other organizational structures that are not necessarily cooperatives. And in our opinion, these sort of pre cooperatives or participatory groups are the beginning to eventually constitute as a legal cooperative. Thank you very much, Alejandra. I don't know if we have the rest of the panelists. Joaquin Pereira, if I could ask you for your participation, and if he's not there, then maybe I'd like to go directly to you, Abraham. You were working directly in one of the projects, the pilots in Tlaquepaque, Jalisco. So my question is, what was the experience like for you of energy transition locally? Coming from or looking at the perspective of large scale projects of energy transition, how are they different to the local perspective?
Well, I will talk about the specific experience in Tlaquepaque, but also in the pilot projects. So, as Marcia said at the beginning of the presentation, it all has to do with the need to implement a flexible methodology for the interests and needs of the territory. So, in Tlaquepaque, there was a need which is related to GSEV's topic. It was a need to create a better relationship with the municipal government and the state in order to take some steps and have more development in energy fields. So it was an initiative to have a land in order to create a plant involving cooperatives and producers in the area. So the energy transition for the production of tiles, for example, should not for the bricks, sorry, could not remain there. It could be bigger and involve more stakeholders. And the methodology also involves the creation of a network that we call ecosystem, which involves not only the group, but many different collectives that can drive sustainable projects in our territories. More specifically, decisions and technology should be in their hands, should be available to them, and they should also have projects and companies that really meet the needs of the community and that are close to environmental needs, the social reality, and the cooperatives agenda, which ultimately is what they have in common as well with the government so that they can develop the political agenda for a community. As Paco was saying, it is key to conceive them as pilot programs because it is true that in Mexico there are not many experiences with energy and cooperatives. So I think that this Luces experience can be a turning point and it can also inspire other groups and cooperatives to be a part of this project. Thank you, Abraham. Now I would like to ask Joaquin Pereira from GIZ who was also one of the promoters of these pilot programs. Just like with the previous speakers, we would like you to explain what the GIZ is so that everyone can understand. And also from a technical perspective, in the process of implementation for pilot programs and in the implementation and execution of a renewable energy project, what are the strengths and challenges for cooperatives? What problems do they need to face at the small scale? And based on your experience with GIZ and your work in Mexico, what are the most adequate technologies for these community participatory processes? Thank you, Francisco. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, the German Corporation for Sustainable Development, GIZ, is a German government entity which supports the Mexican government as well as many other governments around the world. Mexico specifically, it supports sustainable energy projects, environmental protection, climate change, preservation of biodiversity. And that is mainly what it does. So within these general terms, the GIZ has a program called Program to Support the Energy Transition in Mexico, whose main goal is to support Mexico in the energy transition, which means going from being a fossil fuel-based economy to an energy, a renewable energy-based economy, and to increase participation of renewable energies in the market. When it comes to energy efficiency, it also means making industrial, commercial processes, and even individual processes more efficient. We usually leave the lights on, for example, when we're not home. So things like that can also change the situation sometimes. These are individual processes. So regarding the question, one of the main challenges for cooperatives in general in Mexico is, well, the first challenge is for people to understand the energy sector as such. It is a very complex sector, both for fossil fuels and electricity. So hydrocarbons and electricity. It is very hard because it's very technical knowledge that people do not grasp yet. And on the other hand, people are also not aware of, perhaps they don't know what the energy transition is, what it means, which means they are far from understanding the benefits that it may bring and everything that can be done with it. So it is fundamental for people to get trained and for us to help them gain knowledge about renewable energy so that they may understand them and create their own cooperatives, be it exclusively for the production of energy or maybe just as a side of their business or to enhance their levels of production or enhance their life quality as well. It is a big challenge. Germany's experience with cooperatives can also be harnessed. However, it is very necessary to adapt all of the processes because the circumstances in Germany are radically different than the conditions in Mexico when it comes to education, training, funding, and availability of technology. Because in Europe, they have all of the small scale technology that's needed to train and to implement, and we must import it. We unfortunately don't have a country which innovates in this area. Hopefully it can start to innovate gradually. And for small scale technologies, we need innovation. It would be daring to say that it is easy, but it is easier to do it at a small scale than at a larger scale, which would be more complicated. But at a small scale, it could be more accessible. So some of the advantages of cooperatives, as Camila and Alejandra mentioned, these are organizations made by the people. And from an engineer's perspective, once people get organized, which is the hardest part of the project, they are then able to move forward to store electricity, and the technological part, the structure is available. Large-scale technology continues to advance, and electric grids will also complement this technology. They are also modernizing. The greatest challenge, in my opinion, has always been to organize people and for them to understand what they want when it comes to energy. Well, technologies exist, but we also should mention resources. In Mexico and all over the world, there are resources available for the production of renewable energy, such as the wind, the sun, the power provided by water, thermal energy, and also sometimes harnessing organic waste produced by human beings. As long as there are human beings, there will be organic waste. So biogas can also be considered a renewable fuel. It's a biofuel that will always be possible. It will always be available. One of the crucial aspects for the implementation of the technology is that in the organization of the people to create their cooperatives or their energy committees, they need to know their territory very deeply. They must explore the land and understand, for example, how a river can perhaps provide enough power to move a turbine or a generator and generate electricity. The same thing applies to the wind, for example. It's one of the less obvious resources because it is invisible. Sometimes we just feel a breeze and we think that it will not be enough to generate power, but it is likely that it can. We have, for example, a pilot program in Quintana Roo. Of course, there's a lot of wind in that state, and it is one of the main sources of renewable energy for that state at a small scale as well. We are talking about a small scale for distributed generation. The wind in Quintana Roo, in Tamaulipas, in the Pacific coast of Mexico could be a great resource. And then we also have geothermal resources like low enthalpy, as we call it. It means low temperatures. So these are systems that can take advantage of heat exchange and take advantage of the energy stored on Earth between 70 or 50 degrees to generate power as well. And these systems can also be used to enhance energy efficiency to retrieve heat for the industry and also produce power. So that means the technology exists, but we must be curious about it. We should not be afraid of the power sector. We must be very confident. We must not be afraid of it. Of course, it requires knowledge about engineering, mathematics, physics, chemistry. It is necessary to train, to study, and once we understand it, it is possible to implement this in the communities, to create cogeneration systems or hybrid systems, as they are also called, to mix up PV power, wind power, or hydro power, depending on the kind of territory we're talking about. So maybe to conclude, I would like to say that the most feasible technology in Mexico from many perspectives would be photovoltaic, PV power, because it has been about 15 to 20 years since the implementation of solar power began in Mexico. So the implementation costs have decreased. So now it is less expensive, and the expertise in the setup of these systems is now more advanced. So it's the easiest one to implement. It is like putting a puzzle together, putting the pieces of the puzzle together, so you can have any type of solar solar setups that you want, solar installations if you want. So this is something that can be done everywhere. And well, in Germany, they can generate electricity from the sun. So this means that if they can do it there, in Mexico, it would be much easier. But technologies, of course, are viable. However, it is necessary to get to know them, to start doing research, innovating, or as a first step, it would be necessary to import them in order to begin working with them. I believe that would be all. Thank you very much, Francisco. Well, thank you very much, Joaquin. And based on what you just said, we can sum up some of what everyone has said. So the foundation is the groups, the people, the cooperatives, the organization of the people identifying common needs and looking for a solution. And everything after that, the educational process, training, funding, and all of the challenges that must be faced seem to be more complicated. It seems to be at a more advanced level in comparison to other types of cooperatives. And we have seen in these pilot programs and in all of the experiences that when it comes to cooperatives, we always talk about creating partnerships and networks. This is essential here because, as was proved by the pilot programs, resources are necessary, and there are many resources that must be accessed. So training, education, that would be essential. I would like to ask just two more questions so that afterwards we can also have questions from the audience and people who are joining us now. But so for this network that we need to create to maintain cooperatives, who are the key partners that could help you in this process, and which steps should be taken for this international cooperation and these experiences that have happened in other places to be available to other groups? So whoever wants to take the floor and answer the question is welcome to do so. Okay, I think I can start. Yes, go ahead. Okay, I am not going to answer the question, the full question, but maybe a part of it. Well, I think that in order to organize a group, it is important to have leadership. So we need someone to push the project forward, and they can be several different actors, stakeholders. In Germany, there are many cooperatives that come from, for example, a savings and credit cooperative. These are people who already knew each other, someone identified this potential and launched the project. So the beginning is the hardest part, where it is necessary to build trust and everyone thinks, oh no, I don't know, I'm not sure this is going to work. But then when it starts working, everyone wants to be a part of it. So municipalities are also very important partners. They help with raising awareness, providing, for example, a physical space for people to meet and discuss things about these topics would be very important. And I see that all of the local associations, as you said in the pilot projects, also work. So neighborhood organizations, associations, trade organizations in the region could also be partners. What is also very important is that everyone who takes part in the project should feel like they are a part of it and they are contributing somehow. This is one of the interesting aspects of cooperatives because all of the people there have different educational backgrounds. For example, some of them are accountants and they can help with accountability for the cooperative. Maybe someone else has some technical knowledge about electricity and they can help in that way. Someone doesn't have educational background, but maybe they have a lot of time available, so they can do some managerial things and help in any way. So you don't need to hire experts, because hiring all of these experts would be very expensive. But through a cooperative model, this would be possible if people really want to be a part of it. So it is the foundation of the movement. I think it's very interesting. So that is just one insight, this initial insight that I would like to provide. And these are some of the stakeholders that are important. For in Brazil, for example, what's very important are the providers for solar panels. For example, sometimes they can be consultants for the group. So training is also very interesting, because when they find a cooperative project, they can also understand how it all works. So this is my contribution. Thank you. Thank you very much, Camila. Now go ahead, Marce. Thank you. I agree with Camila as well, because the first part in the presentation of the project, we talked about this too. It's important to have local connections and a local presence. It is essential to have a relationship with the groups that have those needs and interests, and also having a broader contact with the community. Because for sustainable energy, as Joaquin was explaining, if you have the technical material that you need, if you have the infrastructure, for example, in Mexico, there are some things that can already be implemented. However, the organization of the people, and as Camila said at the beginning, developing trust, having dialogues, participation can only be built with time. So the community part of it is fundamental. Collaboration with the local government is very important too. In some of the pilot programs, not all of them, but in some of them, the local government also participated. And of course, the federal government is important too. In our case, the connection with INAIS and the dialogue that we had with INAIS was also key to approach the territory. And as for the private sector, they also have an important role, mainly when it comes to funding of technologies that are still expensive in Mexico. More so when we talk about cooperatives in vulnerable or marginalized communities where we are used to working, there are groups that get organized and they decide to participate, but the resources that they have are still limited and they are not enough to purchase this type of technology and equipment. It is necessary to have a group of different stakeholders and have articulation between them. And one of the examples was very good, was that the presence of our social economy lab was key, because we helped articulate the dynamics in the community, the allies in the territory, our partners who funded the project. And in such a way, it was possible to tend to the interests of all of them. Thank you very much, Marce. Okay, I don't know if any of the other panelists would like to answer this question. Yes, I would like to say something quickly. I think there are partners at different levels. Camila talked about the micro level, the territorial level, where the cooperative is located. We also talked about local governments now, and in other spheres, and the federal government, just like Marcia said, and universities. So I believe that there are positive synergies and great connections among certain types of partners, depending on the territories. But we know that this has been very important to have academic support. And once all of the paths have been set out and all of the projects are self-funded and they are sustainable. Perhaps it is not necessary to have so many stakeholders that needed to be there for the pilot programs. For funding, development banking can also have a very important roles when the projects are in the initial stage and it is necessary to present the first roadmap so that it can be executed with less uncertainty, more confidence, and knowing that the way has been paved for the project to continue. So this involves all of the partners and you as universities and the GIZ, the INAIS, all of these organizations have created a team, but of course there are also other partners that will come up. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. And besides, this is of course the positive side of partnerships and cooperations, because sometimes there are also discussions, disagreements, conflicts between partners and territories with different perspectives. This is one of the main challenges to develop projects like this. Well, now we would like to promote participation from the audience. I don't know if you have any questions to the panelists today, or if there are any questions about the projects. We have some minutes available for that. I see that someone raised their hands to ask a question. You will be handed the microphone to do so. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mauricio Gomez. I work at a cooperative called LF del Centro, which focuses on electricity. We work in general distribution grids, and we also install PV systems. We wish to start manufacturing photovoltaic panels. So I don't know if any of you, the DGRV or the GIZ could help us in the building of a solar panel factory. Okay, Joaquin, you can perhaps help answer the question, or Alejandra, Camila, or you can choose. Well, yes, we could provide advisory. We would need to talk about how this could be provided. It's not such a direct process, but advice can be provided about how to do this, maybe in collaboration with partners like INAIS, the agency in Puebla as well, but it would be necessary to know more about the details and what you are looking to do. So manufacturing solar panels, this would be the main goal, I believe. So we need to know more about the project, to know about the details in order to organize. Yes, I would also like to concretely answer. So far in this project, we are only focusing on the organizational part and the technical side from the moment of installation, not the manufacturing. But in the models that have been developed, we also have a model for a cooperative that provides technical and energy services, which would perhaps include manufacturing of panels. So this would be the same model, but we haven't done a pilot project yet. Maybe we can get in touch with you and see what our possibilities are to work together. Okay, there's another question over here. Your name, please. Thank you. My name is Elisa Rodriguez. I am a member of the Magra Isate Artesanal and Modo Vida y Saberes. It is part of INAIS. So it's not really a question. I wanted to share my experience because it was said before that there were few experiences with clean energies in Mexico, but I think it's important that awareness be raised about the experiences that did exist. We do have an experience in San Felipe del Progreso in the state of Mexico. We are a cooperative that sells agroecological products by artisans. So in this journey, we have come into contact with rabbit meat producers. So they decided to get organized in this region And they were able to meet the demand for this product. And once they did, they started diversifying and adding value to their production. And currently, it's very important to have a partnership with the local governments because they are now producing biofuels, which has become increasingly important. The biofuel is already being sold. It's all part of a commercial process now, and they are waiting on the production of new clean energies. Thank you. That's very interesting. And I think that as a university, it's very interesting to know about these experiences because academic institutions can also be a hub for this type of expertise. Well, the government of Mexico City, through the Economic Development Ministry in Mexico, has the General Directorate for Energy and Sustainability, and they are providing training for people to become self-employed and to know how to install solar panels. There is also funding available for cooperatives who wish to acquire solar panels. The Secretariat also provides an incentive, and the CFE, the Electricity Agency, also offers subsidies so that people can drive power generation costs down. This is an initiative that started with the administration of our Governor Claudia Sheinbaum. This is a recurrent activity, so this possibility exists for people to migrate to clean energies. Thank you very much. We need to talk to you about it because we're very interested in that. And I think Marcela had a comment. Yes, I wanted to make a comment about the first person who talked about the project they want to launch about manufacturing of solar panels. This is a key element because we still depend on the manufacturers of the equipment and the technology to import it. So we're still not self-sufficient when it comes to production of solar panels in particular. It will be very important for you to talk to TOSEPA, which is one of the Sierra Norte cooperatives with which we work, because one of their main concerns and interests is also to train technicians to provide maintenance to the solar panels that are already being used there. Because as they say, it's like they already have the technology, but now they can't give maintenance to it because there are no expert technicians that know how to do this. So there is a common interest. Maybe it's not a direct connection, but maybe it would be worth it for you to be in touch because maybe you can have good results from a dialogue. And I also wanted to say something. I think that at this point, in worldwide at the worldwide knowledge level, there are no clean energies, absolutely clean energies, because all energies have an impact on nature and the environment. Some forms of energy are less aggressive to the environment in comparison to distributed generation. Well, it has a really a lower impact than centralized generation by big companies, but we still rely on energies that do have an impact on the environment, even if it's less impact. This is only so that we are all aware that this is not about generating energy, but also transforming our way to consume. And this goes hand in hand with the learning and follow-up processes with the sustainable energy cooperatives. Thank you. I think there was one more question. Is that right? Abraham had to say something. Okay, so while they give you the microphone, I wanted to comment on what she said. We still need to raise more awareness about social economy initiatives. And I think that what GSEP and other spaces provide is precisely what will allow for more partnerships. I would really like for there to be a cooperative for energy generation in Mexico and Latin America. So I would like to invite everyone here to sit down and talk about which steps to take in that direction. Because in the face of this environmental crisis that we're going through and will continue to face, we still need to replicate experiences like this, and ultimately, these forums and experiences will allow for that to happen. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Sabrina Calderon. I am a last year student. I am studying engineering and renewable energies. And my classmates and I created a student association covering all renewable energies. And I was very interested in your presentation about the process and the methodology that must be followed. Because ultimately, many of my classmates and other generations don't really know about social and solidarity economy at all. So to see that this has been applied in our field is very interesting. And I would like to ask you if this methodology could be further explained, or if this could be available in the educational programs so that the students who are about to go into the job market can be more informed about it. Thank you. Thank you for your interest. Precisely what we want is for this experience that we've had with the 5 pilot programs. This might also be interesting for those who have funded these projects, GIZ and the GREV. Well, the experience should not be kept behind closed doors. It should be disseminated and also be a part of educational processes for students just like you, who have a different perspective and are already much more aware than we are, because we are very used to fossil fuels to produce energy. So I think it's also worth mentioning that in our social economy school, in our lab, we have training and follow-up sessions for 7 different purposes. So of course it is also available to you, and you can give me your contact information so that you can get in touch and know more about this.
Thank you very much. And I think we're reaching the end of this panel. I'd like to thank all of the panelists for their contribution. And I think all of us here are one way or another part of this project. So I'd just like to ask everyone, Joaquin, Alejandra, Marce, to tell us, after this experience, after all of this that happened, getting to know the communities, the experiences that you had, knowing that there's so much more to do, so many more steps to take, the GIZ, the university's lab, what do you see as organizations? What do you think is the future for power cooperatives? What would you hope for the future to be as well? Alejandra? Yes, thank you, Paco. I'd like to start because I also wanted to comment very briefly on this last participation from the audience. I think that outreach is very important. All the information that we generate, we try to make public. To do that, we try to create a series of mechanisms. The GIZ is developing an e-learning course on renewable energy. We're working on other similar projects together. We want to make this information available online. We do have some more things to share, but we try to share the more immediate information on our social media as well. Coming back to your question, Paco, about the future, I envision many community processes here in Mexico, many power cooperatives. I think that right now we might find a good opportunity for distributed generation. I think people, as they face the needs, will begin to look for more opportunities for energy transition at home. So I think I'm hopeful about the future. Of course, there are many challenges, which we mentioned, but also I'd highlight the importance of partnerships and networks. Thank you. Joaquin, would you like to add anything? Yes, very briefly, Francisco. I've always thought that the driver of the energy transition will be distributed energy. But for that to happen, people must embrace it. Distributed energy is not about large companies, it's about the people. It will be in the hands of families, communities, local populations. When people see that, when people believe in generating power to improve their production, their lives, and even simply to sell power as such, I think this is what will really drive the energy transition forward. So I think the first step is to stop being afraid of jumping into the topic of reading a book on energy, on power generation, and maybe all we need to do is find someone who knows about electricity, someone who knows about accounting, someone who knows about something else. And that's the way cooperatives are formed. It's about getting together and joining all of our knowledge. I've been told that we need to bring our panel to an end. So the last thing left to say is thank you. Thank you to Camila, Joaquin, Ale, Marcela, and Abraham. And thank you to all our audience. I think the experiences that were shared here are very valuable, especially to highlight the importance of creating networks. And whatever we can do to support that, to help be a bridge for those networks, I think will be very important. So thank you all. And before you step
En Sociedad Cooperativa Trabajadores de Pascual SCL, somos más que una embotelladora de bebidas de frutas. A través del tiempo, hemos demostrado que es posible la organización laboral para consolidar una empresa sana, que hoy es ejemplo del sistema cooperativista en México. Con bebidas como Boing, Pato Pascual y Lulú, que son nuestros estandartes, nos hemos mantenido en el gusto y preferencia de los consumidores de varias generaciones. Para conformarnos como cooperativa, hubo la necesidad de sensibilizar a todos los trabajadores y optar por un estilo laboral y de vida que nos permitiera mejorar nuestra situación económica, social y cultural. Este sistema ha logrado crear una sinergia de productividad y beneficio colectivo. Ser una empresa como esta es un gran orgullo, un ejemplo de perseverancia y esfuerzo, donde el consumidor es quien se beneficia al tener a su alcance productos nacionales de la mejor calidad. En Cooperativa Pascual estamos conformados por una extraordinaria infraestructura acorde al siglo XXI, en el que trabajamos con equipo y tecnología de vanguardia, lo que nos permite fijar metas a corto y largo plazo basadas en las necesidades del mercado y las preferencias de los consumidores. Contamos con 2 plantas de producción, una en San Juan del Río, Querétaro, y otra en Tizayuca, Hidalgo, en las que elaboramos toda la gama de productos aplicando los más altos estándares de calidad, con la confianza de responder en tiempo y forma a la gran demanda del cada vez más competido mercado de bebidas. En estas plantas producimos más de 40 millones de cajas anuales, con el apoyo de 4 sedes en la Ciudad de México, 30 sucursales y un creciente número de distribuidores autorizados a lo largo del territorio nacional. Comercializamos nuestras ya tradicionales marcas como son Boing, Pato Pascual, Lulú, Néctasis, Agua Purificada, Mexicola y Power Dog, además de la leche Pascual. Nuestras plantas tienen la certificación de sistemas de gestión de calidad ISO 9001-2015 en los procesos de elaboración de bebidas, néctares y pulpas de fruta. Asimismo, contamos con la certificación de FDA en Estados Unidos, lo que nos permite exportar nuestros productos a este país. Para la elaboración de nuestros productos, utilizamos fruta selecta, verificada directamente por nuestra área de control de calidad. Apoyamos el desarrollo y crecimiento del campo nacional, ya que, beneficiando a los productores del campo mexicano, en Cooperativa Pascual consumimos más de 20,000 toneladas de frutas al año. Y con la compra directa del azúcar que se requiere para la elaboración de las bebidas que comercializamos, se apoya también a los ingenios azucareros de nuestro país. En una empresa como esta, basamos parte de nuestra fortaleza en la distribución de nuestros productos. Por esto, contamos con una infraestructura de unidades de reparto, asegurando así que nuestras bebidas se puedan disfrutar en cada rincón de México y el extranjero. Para Cooperativa Pascual, el consumidor es lo más importante. Por esto, nuestras decisiones, el personal, las inversiones en tecnología y capacitación se enfocan en satisfacer a los paladares más exigentes. La excelencia de nuestros productos nos ha merecido diversos premios, como el de la excelencia europea, el americano de calidad y reconocimientos internacionales al prestigio comercial de bebidas de marca y calidad. Dentro de la cooperativa tenemos una Fundación Cultural Trabajadores de Pascual y del Arte AC, con un amplio acervo pictórico de importantes artistas. Esta fundación realiza exposiciones por todo el país y apoya diversos proyectos culturales independientes. Por otra parte, contamos con un centro recreativo ubicado en San Juan Teotihuacán para el esparcimiento de los trabajadores y del público en general. Orgullosos de nuestra apuesta por el crecimiento sostenible, el compromiso con el medio ambiente, la creación de empleos y la integración, llevamos nuestras bebidas a cada vez más personas, que son la auténtica base de nuestro futuro. Ser una cooperativa no es solo una figura administrativa, es la orgullosa realidad de una empresa 100% mexicana. Somos lucha, somos calidad. Somos la experiencia de más de 80 años en el mercado. Somos líderes en la elaboración de bebidas. Somos Cooperativa Pascual. Calidad que sabe a tradición.
Gracias.